Christopher, you did
Yo.
it again. Yeah, another all-star here. I looked up looked up some of his history, and man, you landed a great guy here, and we're excited to interview Pat Kinsel. Pat, CEO of Proof, the founder and CEO, and which is really, I knew this as Notarize, and this is still a consumer brand, Notarize, from what I know. But I got to tell you, excited to hear your story, Pat. Welcome to Ditch Digger CEO, buddy.
Awesome. Excited to be here. I love the name of the podcast, so happy to participate.
Well, thank you, man. And all it is, it's about, really building something small into something that serves many, and what that looks like, right? So my story, some people, many people know, I was kind of laughed at as a ditch digger. Well, I embraced that title because it's kind of funny. It's from the movie Caddyshack back then. And I looked a little like Danny. Back then I had hair. Okay. I had a lot of hair. I looked like the caddy, the caddy in Caddyshack, Danny, who had the skinny kid that had all the hair. And so it kind of stuck to me. But either way, hey, we want to tell your story. We want to hear about your upbringing and everything that makes you who you are today. Because when people hear your story, I guarantee many are going to attach to that and say, "Man, if Pat can do it, I can do it." Right?
Yes, it's funny. I often joke for years I'm trying to be the Abe Froman of notary. So for folks who get that joke, but I relate to your point. I mean, I go to all these tech conferences and there's all these people working on these fancy projects, and they say, "What are you working on?" And I say, "Online notary." And they go, "Huh." And
so wait. Let's go back real quick. Where do you come up with Abe Froman? I know where it came from, but where does it come from?
Ferris Bueller, Sausage King of Chicago. So,
well, guess what? The funny thing is, you say this. I just found out last week. So I bought a property on a lake called Lake Geneva. I'm going to build a house on Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, a beautiful lake. Okay, and I go say hi to the neighbor. We get to know each other. He's an Italian guy. He buys this house from none other than that guy. Now his name's not that. His name's not Abe Froman, but it's a name that's known in Chicago. And anyway. But he's the sausage. He is the guy, the Sausage King that movie that they talk about in that movie. And he's got a boathouse. It's a really cool stone boathouse on Lake Geneva. And the lower level of it, which would usually be, you throw your junk in there and your tools in there, maybe, right? Wrong. This guy's got probably a $200,000, $300,000 kitchen in there.
Wow.
With the coolest commercial equipment you can imagine. So it's kind of funny you say that, because I just found this out last week.
So my dad always said to me as a kid, "There's real money in this stuff," and I think that, for me, when I started my career, I was in this all highfalutin tech, and then I said, I got to go solve a real problem. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
All right, cool. Hey, so I sorry to interject there, but I had to interject when I just discovered this a week ago. So go on. Let's talk about kind of your upbringing, your parents, the kid you were, and how somehow in your mind it came across eventually that you could actually have the nerve to go out and make your own way.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Bay Area, and so I was exposed to a lot of tech, to a lot of entrepreneurship. My neighbor, I grew up in the Bay Area back when it was still more normal America, I should say. Neighbor was a dentist. My mom's a doctor. My dad's in real estate. But I also had a neighbor that was involved in Sun early on, grew up riding my bike around the Stanford campus. And so sort of always exposed to what this could be. So for me in my life, it's always something that I envisioned or imagined, but I'm not an engineer. I'm not someone that's going to write code. And so for me, I've always been obsessed with sort of trying to solve problems and wanting to start a business. I was reading business books back as a teenager. I still have this like Incorporation for Dummies book that I read. So I've always been obsessed with starting a business. And I would say my personality trait would be what my grandfather always said, which is that I leap before I look. That's what he always said to me as a kid. And I think my business today, there was all sorts of regulatory issues. Like I started, Notarize back in an era where everything was being moved to the phone. Push button, get pizza, push button, get a doctor, right? So this idea of push button, get a notary, I don't think it was the idea that was that compelling or interesting. I just jumped into it without kind of understanding everything and said, I'm going to make it happen. I think the thing that's really commendable of the whole team is just how we've stuck with it and actually worked through all the issues to deliver the service. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, we use it through our businesses for some time now. I never imagined you could do this until you guys figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a pain. It's so funny. I started the company because I had a bad notarization. So my career, like I said, I grew up in the Bay Area, started my career actually at Microsoft, where I got to work on some really cool projects there. I was really a junior employee, but I got a lot of exposure. I did this really cool project with Facebook that I got to, work a little bit with Zuckerberg and the guy who's the CTO of Facebook now, Andrew Bosworth. It was funny at the time because like Microsoft was freaking out. I was 26. I had to remind them that Zuckerberg is only 6 months older than me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
if he can run this company, I think I can have a meeting, Uh, but no, that's how I started my career. And then left Microsoft, started a business. I sold to Twitter. And then I went and got a document notarized and the guy screwed it up. And I thought this is just ridiculous. Like this paper-based process, slow as hell. If it were software based, it would be perfect every time. It'd be faster. It just seems so intuitive to me that this should be digital.
So you're saying you started a biz, sold to Twitter, and
Oh yeah, so I basically walked into a UPS store, got the document. I really must have frozen there for a bit.
yeah.
So sold the company to Twitter, and when Twitter went public, I needed to get this document notarized. So I went to the UPS store, got the form notarized. It got sent off actually to Morgan Stanley, and I got a call that said the compliance department caught that the notary stamped it but didn't sign it. Huge pain in the butt. So to me, I just thought I've got to find a way to digitize this, and jumped headlong into it. So this is going back almost 10 years now.
Wow. Awesome. And so 10 years ago, you said, okay, you got to solve the problem. How do you figure out how to solve this problem? I mean, that's a huge problem to solve that nobody else has ever thought of or accomplished, right?
Yeah, so I love a systems engineering challenge. I love a little bit of build something, get some people to do some stuff, change some rules. So I really love that sort of complexity. And my background in product at Microsoft, I was a product manager. So the first thing I did was say, can I build this, right? So I did a bunch of research, tried to figure out the rules for notarization, and ultimately found in Virginia that they had actually passed a bill allowing for video notarization. There's all these ridiculous requirements. None of them made sense. They pointed to all these sort of federal standards that were, gobbledygook. But I just read through all of it and kind of decided I could build it. And then, of course, the next question was, the joke going back to being the sausage king, right? You don't want to be the notary king of Virginia. You want to build a national product, right? So the next question was, could I do this nationally? And I just read all the laws and went through them all. And I convinced myself, hell, I think I can build this thing. I think I can operate out of Virginia and do it nationally. And I wrote up a document. I sent it to some attorneys, and they were like, huh, worth the college try, right? So based on that, I went and I raised some money. I started the company, and it's funny, I took me about 5 years to convince people of some work that I did sitting on the couch. It's just so intuitively obvious. Like if you think about a driver's license you get from one state, you can go to the next state. A birth certificate, a marriage certificate. If you're familiar with the issues around internet sales tax, like all these things kind of root back to the same core principles and concepts. And but it took a lot of convincing, a lot of lawyers, a lot of lobbyists, a lot of convincing.
So when you looked at this, when you started it, did you think it'd be 5 years before you could actually convince people that there's a viable option? And did you have a number in your mind of what it would take an investment to get there?
I had no idea, and honestly, it has not played it all out like I thought. I mean, I thought I would launch this thing and just overnight, everyone would want to do this, right? Of course. And in some ways that's how it went. Like when we launched, we got so much coverage. I was in every publication. And if you think about like it's such a crisp concept, like, hey, you can notarize documents online now. Everyone's got a notary story, right? Everyone drove around town and couldn't find a place, so it really resonated. We got a bunch of interest, but I think, we're often compared to Uber in some ways. And I always say that I reject the comparison. Because if you think about Uber, they were able to go straight to consumers and really market to consumers and say sort of, regulator be damned, this is what we're doing, right? If you think about a notarized document, imagine if you took an Uber to the airport and they said, doesn't count, go home, try again, right?
Yes.
That's super painful. That pisses people off, right? And
Uh-huh.
so the beginning of the company was a lot of people notarizing forms and them getting rejected. If you sell a boat, it turns out that title transfer goes to the Coast Guard. If you sell a plane, it goes to the FAA. If you do a passport, it goes to the State Department.
Yep.
So for years, we were literally just like, going on LinkedIn, trying to find the person at like the Coast Guard responsible for document policy and reaching out and trying to have conversations. But what was really great is that we then would hear the objections, we'd hear the concerns that people would have. We could address them. We'd build into oh, you need a stamp on the document. We'll put it on. Oh, it needs to go into a system with certain margin dimension. So where we stand today at this point is I've got a platform with more than 4 million rules built into it. Every county, every industry.
Wow.
Yeah. So like you just push a button and you get on and you get the document, but there's a ton more that goes into it by virtue of that history and that time that we spent.
Wow. Over 4,000.
4 million actually permutations of rules. Yeah.
But 4 million. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. If you think about it,
Oh,
like if you want to do a real estate transaction in Texas, First American has a set of rules and Fidelity has a set of rules. And in one county, it's a set of rules. And so it's this whole ball of wax that we've been able to automate for people.
man. How many people on the team within the first few years, and then where are you at today?
Yeah, we were a small company for a long time. So going into COVID in 2020, we were about 80 people. Really predominantly in product and engineering, and we were figuring things out going into COVID. So we did the country's first ever mortgage closing on the internet in 2017. That was a huge deal. We got, the federal government and the GSEs and the title underwriters to sign off. It was covered in the Wall Street Journal.
What
We
kind
did
of
the
closing
first-
was it?
It was a refi transaction with United Wholesale Mortgage and Stewart Title sold to Freddie Mac in August of 2017. I remember it like it was yesterday. And that was a huge accomplishment for us because we had to convince people that it was legal, that we could do it across state lines, that the title insurance policy would hold, everyone's lien position would be maintained. So that for us was like, the Everest that we were trying to climb for years. Like we've got to get people to do a mortgage without any contingencies or side letters. Like this thing needs to be a totally saleable mortgage into the secondary market. So we
Yep.
climbed that hill in 2017. Then we did first auto transaction, first online will. So we've just kind of gone industry by industry. COVID hits, this huge accelerant for the business, as you would expect. I was in the first week of COVID on the phone. I had governors' offices calling me from across the country. We have to pass emergency notary legislation. What needs to be in it? I was on the phone with the federal government in screaming matches, about the rules and the policies and what needed to happen. And what I was saying to everyone is like, we're so focused on liquidity. What about transaction liquidity? That like the economy can't shut down because people can't meet, right?
Yeah.
And there was so much, that was just the craziest time. And so we went, from 80 people to about 450 people really fast. And now actually we're 200. So coming out of COVID, we've had to right size the business in a more normal market. So we're just around 200 right now.
Wow.
Crazy
Wow.
time.
How did you scale up that fast? Because right now we have a tech company, we're growing, and we're scaling fast, but we're doubling annually revenues, maybe a little more than doubling, and then our team is growing by 70-80% a year. That's a lot. I mean, we'll be 70 people or so here by the end of the year, right? But next year we'll be 120 or 30, and the following year we still will be 300 or so, right? But how do you do it that fast? And what type of luck did you have as far as finding quality people when you grew that fast?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we basically said at the time, what can we control? And we said we're going to go remote, right? We don't know how long this is going to last. Let's make an active decision, right? And so we said we're going to focus on finding the absolute best talent we can from across the country. And that has been very successful for us as a business because we brought on recently the former chief architect of DocuSign, for example, as our CTO. He lives in Seattle. I live in Boston. there's been a bunch of people like that. Our general counsel lives in Detroit, right? And so I would say it's sort of the top of the company, people who get it and see the vision and truly understand what we're trying to accomplish. Sourcing nationally has been really fantastic. I think within the product and engineering organizations, it's gone great, and we've really leaned on networks, and really we prioritized in that ramp up period, saying to folks, my view is most people, especially in engineering, job hopping isn't like fun, right? Interviewing is not fun. And so we said, look, is there someone in your network who you would unquestionably recommend to be here? And let's just cut through the bull and do, one interview and make an offer. And so we really ramped quickly, and we brought in some fantastic talent because people called their friend from their former job and said, look, no BS, we're trying to scale the company. I vouch for you, like, have a call, make sure this is a fit. Let's go, right? And so that really helped us ramp up. The area where I think we made some mistakes was in the go-to-market organization. And I don't think that we brought in the wrong people, but the need to train folks to get them to understand the vision, the mission, whatnot, was hard in a remote context when we were moving that fast.
Sure.
And the market really whipsawed us around. I mean, during COVID, selling this product was the easiest thing on earth. We got on the phone and we said, it's not safe to meet with your customers. You still need to do business. You should sign up, right? So we signed up so many, clients you wouldn't believe. And then coming out of COVID, that's not how you sell a product, right? You got to explain the value. You've got to explain what it's going to do for them. You've got to be a partner to them in their own digital transformation and journey. And that's really where we've right-sized the business is, let's get back to basics and go to market and really focus on training people and telling our story.
Yeah, kind of the feedback loop, right? I mean, when you're building so fast like you were, probably didn't invest as much time because maybe didn't have to, and you're urgently growing and scaling, right? But in these businesses more today than ever, right? Really following that feedback loop and understanding the customer experience is so key, right?
It's so key, and it really requires, tooling and systems and a cadence to the business. I mean, that's something I've really, over the last couple of years, tried to think more about. In my 10th year doing this, most startups, when they're, getting off the ground, like they're thinking 3, 6, 9 months ahead, right? When you make it 10 years, you really are afforded the opportunity to take a step back and say, you know what, we're actually going to be around in 10 years. I can think in years, right?
Yeah.
What do we need to get done this year? What do we need to get done next year, right? And that lets you start to think about a cadence to a business, right? So a review, an annual review, a strategy, planning session, a company kickoff and offsite. How often should the product organization get together? How does feedback come in from the field and inform strategy? That's what's really fun, for us as a phase now. And how do you build an organization that, like, if I get hit by a bus, everyone gets it. The feedback's coming in from customers. We can keep marching forward. And so, I'm sure, like you, it gets to the point where you realize your team and your company is the product, right? It is the thing that you're trying to build. And so that's a really fun phase to be in.
Absolutely. I love the fact that, because I found this to be true too. When I could go to we're going to grow fast. When I go to the teammates that understand our core values, that understand, the value proposition to our customers, the excitement that we have for our business, right? I go to them and I say, can you find one or two people, each of you, right, that you can vouch for high quality people, right? That will have the same passion you and I have, right? You can do that. And we've done this in our businesses, but oftentimes we hire headhunters, we do all these things, and we go back to that and it works. It actually works, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how we look past that too often. And not just that, but then the teammates have a sense of ownership to that person that may have taken that job, right? If they're great, they say, "Hey man, Pat, how about that? Isn't she great?" Right?
Yeah.
And it's a great celebration, to have with your teammates. And then other times they're like, "Hey man, I'm sorry it didn't work out. I thought Joe was what we needed. I did, but now next time I'll know, right?" And so again, I feel like getting your teammates involved in that process is invaluable when you can do it.
I totally agree. I also think there's a spark. I mean, during COVID, again, like, we were on such a ramp that I think a lot of people joined because they thought they were going to make a lot of money, right? And I'm all for financial incentive. I mean, I think that's incredibly important. But at the same time, the person who runs product for us, when I interviewed him, he got on and said, please tell me you understand this is more than a notary company. And without, geeking out too much, a lot of the underlying technology allows us to really transform these high trust transactions on the internet, right? Cryptographic signatures, identity policy, content watermarking. Um, Now I knew that, but I hadn't found a lot of people who got it. So I said, God damn, this guy gets it, right?
Yeah.
There's a marketing candidate I talked to last week who gets on the phone and basically said the same thing. And so, there's these pockets of people out there, that can kind of emerge, who see the vision and whatnot. They can be really additive to the company based on their life experience, right? So it's the kind of classic go slow to go fast. We made some mistakes during COVID.
When you think of all these industries that you're serving today, Pat, did you go directly to these industries to find talent in many cases?
We did, and we have, and that's been an interesting challenge unto itself. I mean, the mortgage industry, we digitized the mortgage closing, right? And that is an incredibly complicated workflow and process. And what's interesting is we sit at the intersection between a mortgage lender and a title company. And what I will tell you is if you go talk to mortgage lenders, they will all tell you title does nothing, we do all the work. And if you go talk to a title company, they'll say mortgage does nothing, we do all the work, right? So there's not a lot of empathy or shared understanding about how these things intersect, right? And we sit in the middle of this. And we've tried different things. Let's bring people in with a deep expertise in this one area, a deep expertise in this other area. And it really hasn't always worked, right? And so for us, and we've also said, let's take pure software people and put them into this vertical. And it also really hasn't worked, right? I think at the end of the day, what really matters are people who are change agents, right? People who take real responsibility for understanding a problem, thinking holistically about it. That's what works, right? So they could come from these industries, they could be adjacent to these industries, but they've got to be able to say, let me step out of myself and look at the problem. So that's been really critical.
Yeah. I mean, and again, change agents, I think, is so important, right? I mean, you got to get people that like embrace this what you're doing to change an industry, changing the world, basically, right? And again, I go back to, we've got some amazing friends and business and entrepreneurs, and many of them are podcast guests. And one of them is Uri Levine. Uri Levine was the founder of Waze and founder of a bunch more companies, right? And when I first met him in Israel, seeking out some great minds in technology, I got to be friends with him. He came back to the Chicagoland area, and I spent a few days with him on a boat and hanging out with him to get to know him. I was actually recruiting him to be a board member of mine. In the end, he was too expensive. We remained friends, and he's been a great friend, and so it's okay, right? But either way, bottom line is Uri wrote a book, and it's a simple book. And he wrote right before we did the podcast with him about a year ago. But it's basically falling in love with the problem. Something exactly what you did, right? Exactly what the best solutions we find, the best entrepreneurial stories are those that people that fall in love with a problem that doesn't seem fixable, and it's probably in a huge ass market, right? And when they solve that problem and they go through a lot to solve it, it becomes a great business. And this is what you've done, which is, it's so cool, because nobody would envision 10 years ago that this was a solvable problem. They'd be like, Pat, no way. I'm sure many people told you, really? Seriously, Pat? You really think you can do this? I mean, who do you think you are, right?
Yeah, no, I heard it a lot. I heard it a lot. Yeah, I would say more than that. I mean, like I am absolutely in love with the problem, but the problem I don't see as being notarization. I mean, the problem I see is that the world is in the midst of digitization, right? And so how do these industries actually go digital and maintain trust? And what I have found is, like, I wake up one day and we have, any company that's in the leading space of digitizing the auto industry is our partner. The real estate industry, it's our partner. The equipment leasing industry, it's our partner. Like, I could go on. So I wake up and I'm in equipment leasing. I'm in mortgage lending. I'm in auto, right? So it's such a broadly fascinating set of issues. And what I have come to appreciate is if you are doing something in paper or you're meeting someone in person, it's for a reason. There's a rule that exists or a business process that exists that has to be addressed. And that's what I love about it. Is like, how do we unpack the problem? Oh, well, there's an audit requirement that's in the mortgage process that's set by Equifax that no one understands, and they have this requirement. Let's go talk to them, right? So I think that front foot, let's go talk to them. First principles thinking of always like, why are you trying to do this? And almost always it's for good reason. We're concerned about trust in the transaction. We wanted a wet ink signature. Okay, well, let's address that. Did you know it's more trustworthy if you do this? We need the data. Okay, great. Whatever it may be, right? We can always address these problems and these issues. And so that's what keeps me engaged every day. That's what keeps me coming back to, to this all the time. And that's why I see it as like an endless project, right? Like there's so much more stuff that needs to be digitized. And AI right now is like leading people to freak out. Like if you think about deepfakes and what that means for these industries, it is a huge problem if you can go to your retirement plan and someone can pretend to be you and take your money.
Yes.
And so the urgency around these problems. So suddenly I'm in that space, right? That's infinitely interesting, right? So I love it. It's no different than a cog, right? Literally, my dad as a kid had a friend. He would always tell me, "This guy's made more money than anyone I know, and he literally makes widgets," right?
Yeah.
You don't realize like those get used in a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
So you get a lot of exposure.
100%. And so when you think about that, I look at all these things. We have 15 companies that I'm the majority owner of and chairman of today, and I've started many little companies, right, about 40 and 43 years. But I'm when I think I have a solution, and not always is it as good a solution as I think, right? It's gotten way better at this in my last 20 years than my first 20 years. But when I think of a solution, then I start thinking about, okay, what is the value proposition? What's this value proposition worth to the customer, right? And when I think of your solution, it's like, man, how the heck did you figure out what the value was and how you would charge for this value? How you gonna monetize this, right?
Yeah.
Because some people don't think, oh, it's not that big a value. My wife's a notary, my friend's a notary. It's easy for them. It doesn't seem like a big deal. But boy, I've lived exactly what you're talking about. Lots of closings. I bought a lot of equipment. I've signed a lot of deals, and over my history, and oftentimes it's a pain in the neck to find the notary, right? And so either way, it's
I'd
how do
say
you
that
figure out what it's worth?
I don't know that I did, just to be clear. I don't know that I figured it out versus if sort of a freight train hit me on the side of the head, So I announced this thing, 9 years ago now. We get a ton of coverage, like I said. Within the very first week I was in business, I got an email from one of the top 4 banks in the country, one of the largest mortgage lenders, and one of the largest auto insurers. And they literally said to me, if you can solve this problem, it's transformational for our business. I launched this as a consumer product. I just personally didn't want to go see a notary again. So I get on the phone with these folks and I say, tell me your problem. And they say, look, we do 800,000 of these a year. We do 3 million of these a year, right? They're rife with errors, right? It takes 21 days to get them back on average. We've heard from a lot of customers, 21 days, and then 30% have errors where you have to do it again. And the stories that you hear, it's like you think about wealth management. These are their clients. They send them a form. They're now harassing their client. Can you get this thing done? Can you get this thing done? Can you get this thing done? So yeah, the person may have a notary, but that notary is not ingrained in a process, right? It's still, you got to print this thing out. You got to go see them. You got to ship it back. There's no transparency. There's no visibility. There's nothing, right? And so, I was with a major bank and they were giving me advice for the meeting. And they said, just say the same things over and over again. I said, great. What is it? We save you time. We save you money. We reduce risk. Time, money, risk, time, money, risk, time, money, risk. Now that's taken other flavors, right? We also increase conversion rate and things like that. But at the end of the day, people, as cool as something is, as obvious as something is, people don't buy it if there's not business value. So we can walk into a customer now at enterprise and we can say, look, you're going to spend $5 million with us, but I'm going to have $100 million economic impact on your business, right? And it's through increased conversion rate, reduce costs, reduce, fraud, That's how we win.
That's awesome. And what's when you look at where you're at today and where you could be 10 years from now in your vision, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's our pivot from Notarize to Proof, right? And so again, the journey of Notarize is start out as a consumer product, basically a notary in your pocket, We answered calls in less than 1 second. So instant, convenient, moved to a business product, moved into an industry workflow solution, mortgage, auto, things like that. On that journey, the clients basically said to us, hey, can you actually help us reduce fraud? Right? You're meeting the standard for identity verification. Can we do more? And they said, hey, we want to use this for everything, right? We got a lot of transactions that we don't actually need to get notarized, but we want a fraud mitigation product. We want certainty in these transactions. We may have a complex compliance obligation. So can you help us fight fraud and build a product that you can use for everything? So that's proof, right? And so there's no notary in the transaction. They're not notarizations, but it's very similar. It's extremely low friction. You can put it in front of everything, and it really combats fraud and creates certainty in these transactions. So you ask in 10 years, look, my belief is that everything should be signed with proof, right? That's, of course, a self-serving goal. But if you think about what's happening in the world today, we need certainty in the people we transact with and the records we rely upon, right? If you're a mortgage lender and you collect documents to underwrite a loan, you need to know if they're real. If you're going to send someone, average fraud in wealth management is $57,000. Average retirement claim, $130,000, right? You need to know the person you're doing business is who they say they are, and you need to know the documents that you collect are legitimate and signed and produced by who claims to. So,
okay, so 10 years from now, let's recreate what happened. I think yesterday, I saw a video of Biden, and people say it's probably not him. He must be dead. There's this report of urgent, emergency to get him into the hospital and then fly him out of Vegas. All these things, right? And again, when you see him yesterday, he didn't say anything. He just kind of made a smirk and then went from a car to a plane, right? Probably pretty easy to recreate him in some way to make it look real. How does proof come in 10 years from now and say, we want to know if that guy is real?
It's not 10 years. I mean, this is the problem we're working on today. I mean, I was down in DC a couple of weeks ago. I testified in Congress. We met with the White House. I was on the phone earlier today with the State Department. These are issues that people are dealing with right now. There already are technical solutions to these problems. I mean, without geeking out, there's a consortium called C2PA, which is trying to address these issues. There's all sorts of technical standards. What we need is adoption of these things, right? And that's where, as a company, we think that we can solve the problem. The challenge, without, again, geeking out too much, the entire internet relies upon what's called public key infrastructure, public-private key pairs. If you are sending data from your server to someone else's server, there's ways to make it so that it's trusted, right?
Yep.
That same infrastructure can be applied to consumers and to identity. There's a ton of work around that. The problem is, how do you get people to use it, right? So as a company, we think what we have done in our history is take these highly complex standards, put them into a really consumer-friendly, service with really clear business value. And that's what we're now trying to do as we move into this world where content is watermarked, associated with your identity. Is we want to build the business applications and the consumer experience that drives adoption of these really cool technologies that exist. And so, already today, the campaigns are signing content. There's camera manufacturers that are now, signing content so you can know. So this is a solvable problem, right? And this is what I'm working on kind of every day right now.
Well, Pat, not everybody believes it is. We're blessed with people like you out there that know it's solvable, right? Because not everybody believes this is solvable. With AI and computer generation, where things are going today, boy, you're right. There's going to be so much opportunity for you to solve these problems that you would have never imagined 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, I think one of the key changes people sort of recognize is that everyone talks about AI in their business like you get to decide when you're going to use it, right? Yeah, we might use it for underwriting. I might use it for data intake. We're experimenting. We're playing with it. But the reality is, like, the guys in Russia get to decide when they're going to use it against you, right? And so people need better tools to protect their business. There's a kind of I would describe the policy in the country today as presuming that everyone is who they say they are, and we try to catch bad actors. I think that needs to be inverted, which is to say that when people do business, they need to demonstrate who they are in a way that can be trusted. I'm not saying people need to share all their private information. these systems, these standards that are being created, what they represent is the way that you can share something that someone can trust without giving them all of your information, right? That's really important and
Yeah.
critical. And so these things are, again, they're totally solvable. A bunch of companies, including us, are working on this today. The government is focused on this. So this is going to come about, but it's, like I said, like, again, I started a notary company. I just didn't want to go see the notary again. I'm now meeting with the White House and I'm testifying in Congress and I'm having all these crazy conversations about AI. And so I'm a big believer. You just never know where the journey is going to take you, but might as well just get going.
So what have you testified on in Congress? That's interesting stuff.
This issue. And so, they're talking about AI and deepfakes and policy. And, there's a lot of really challenging issues that the government needs to grapple with, right? And so things around, equity and access, and people talk about model transparency, right? If you're going to use AI to underwrite a loan, how do we know that it makes fair decisions? I don't claim to be an expert on those subjects at all, and those are difficult issues, to resolve. And then there's just, what are we going to do in a world where you can impersonate people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that to me is a pretty cut and dry area to have to make some decisions. Like, should you be allowed to impersonate someone without their permission? I think the answer is no. You give me one example of why I should be able to pretend to be without your permission. Like, I've yet to hear a legitimate one, right? And then second of all is we need to be able to trust people and content we do business with. So we're very focused on sort of the practical, addressable set of solutions that people can come up with while other people kind of have the big debate around AI and what it means for, the workforce and society. Like, those are difficult challenges.
When you look at your business now, and you like, as you said, you pivoted because of customers said, hey, we need to now, you got a product, or can you build something now that we can fight fraud on a consistent basis? You're onto something here, right, Pat? And what else have you been asked to do? And you're going to have so many opportunities. I just look at, I have so much fun building businesses. When my customers ask for something, I'm like, is that another business, right? Is that another problem I can solve, right?
Totally.
And you're going to see, I'm sure you are seeing, abundant of opportunities of more stuff you can do and solve. And yet you have to stay focused, because this is a big opportunity you're in the middle of. You have to stay focused. How do you, when you see an amazing opportunity, how do you address it? As far as when you can build something around another opportunity, how do you address that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I certainly have been accused at sometimes of having shiny object syndrome, right? And so, I think for us on the technology side, we have a really great team now. And so we're always asking ourselves, how do we build things to have maximum optionality in the future? And so, we've done things around these digital certificates, and we've decided to take on maybe more complexity at the outset, maybe a higher compliance burden, in order to create optionality for us in the future. So we have some core principles. People prove who they are. They're given the ability to attach their identity to things that could be notarizations or not. And we want to do those ways. Those things are the most sort of scalable, flexible things to make possible. I think where we have really decided to pull back as a business is going deep into the verticals. We want to partner, right? So when we did the country's first mortgage closing, we built like the whole stack, right? In order to make that possible. When we go into new businesses or new categories now, we want to be like the Intel inside, right? It's not our customer experience, and it's probably not our business process or workflow that we're embedding ourselves in. And one of the primary challenges that we have is behavior change. So behavior change is always easier for us if we can sit in the tool someone's already using. If you're in an auto business, you might use Salesforce. We should have a button inside Salesforce. We should rely on their business logic. So our really core premise is, can you trust the person you're transacting with? And can you trust the record that it produces, right? And we really try to stick to that. So we want to invest in things that's going to increase trust and certainty, new identity verification methods, right? New ways of signing content, but always thinking about doing it in a way that creates maximum flexibility and optionality for us, for our customers, and we stick pretty close to that core.
Yep. So invest in things that create trust and certainty. But it's a big deal in all business, but yours at a whole nother level. Um,
Cool.
and you know, we're building a tech company right now that's growing very fast, and we're having a lot of fun with it. And we use AI to assess the condition of real estate all over the world. And you know, we've been experts for, you know, in our industry at paving concrete, paving asphalt, and all that. So it was easy for us to find the best minds to build the AI around, you know, pavement assessment and management and engineering and specification, right? Um, but guess what? We've got to build all these other verticals for these customers within this product site technology. You know, we built the roofing models, and that's done, and it's a great product built on civil and structural engineers around roof maintenance and all that. And now we put together an amazing landscape team of landscape architects, arborists, soil and turf scientists, and all that. And now we're building that, right? But it's interesting how people go about doing that, right? You're going to be blessed to be in front of these inquisitive industries that are participating with you, right? They're going to most likely, especially the biggest of the world, are going to want you on their team. You're going to be have opportunity to be around the greatest experts in every vertical, I think, right? And that's
Totally.
and you can't expect to be those experts, right? You have to partner with them. And with your traction so far that you've created in this business, that nobody else thought of, right? Now you've got people that gotta believe what, like, want to be on your side. Hey, Pat, let me help you build this. Or hey, Pat, this is a solution we gotta have. Let us throw our 5 best minds in front of you to help you build that. You
Yeah, I
know?
get that. And then also we just get the, hey, can you help us? Like, and that's where we really love, to come in. And I think, we're very fortunate for some of the decisions we made in the past. I talked about the 4 million rules on the platform, right? So, we were trying to bring this product to market back in the day. We changed the law in Texas. I had to do Texas regs. We changed the law in Nevada. I had to do Nevada regs. We took a step back and said, there should be a generalized service, right? How do we build this in a way that has flexibility? There's a different identity policy, great. Da, 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 da. So over the course of time, we end up with this really configurable platform. Customers ask us to move into fraud and risk. Okay. So really all we're doing is now we're taking that flexible platform and we're just adding more policy,
Yeah.
And so now people call us and say, hey, can you help me solve, a call I got recently was, hey, we're trying to onboard clients from Europe. This is a bank. And that is a requirement. We need a witness and then an identity policy. And do great. We can do it.
Yeah.
And so that's where it just like, it's the classic Bill Gates quote, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10, right?
Well, hold on, wait, say that, slow down. People say it again,
I
overestimate.
believe I got it right. They overestimate what they can do in a year and they underestimate what they can do in a 10. Now the adage in tech these days is a month in a year, not 1 in 10, but it's true. I mean, so, you work on something for a decade. I believe software compounds. If you listen to customers and you continue to build product, it compounds. And I think there's ways of accelerating that. Google's advantage, and we'll see if it maintains with OpenAI, every click they learn, they have more clicks. That's why Bing can't catch up. Right now,
Yeah.
OpenAI is different. So, we built our system where we learn, like we've got transactions, we learn, it gets better. Meeting times go down, error rates go down. You get to a point where the thing's rock solid, right? So that's where we are today.
So wait, a couple of things to think about. I mean, I'd love to hear. Number one, what type of system? Is there any type of management system you use? I mean, in my businesses, we've been fans of EOS system, the traction system and processes. For leadership, we have a visionary. You got the execution or the operations minded leader, right? And with your team, you build these short and long term, goals and visions, right? What do you guys do? Do you buy into anything that served you well?
Not at present. I mean, we have had periods of time where some have been quite helpful. We did OKRs and things like that for a period of time, which worked for a while. To be honest, I think the thing that we have really solidified around is more real clarity on the company's bet at a period of time. And, when I changed the company's name from Notarize to Proof, it had a lot of goals, right? External and internal. And internally, what I was really trying to do was wake the team up. We're really doing this, right? And that was a really galvanizing experience for us, where it was like, hey, there's all sorts of projects and goals and OKRs and KPIs and whatnot. And it was like, reset, take a step back. What's our mission as a company? It's not just a notarized document. It's to bring trust and certainty to critical transactions in our personal and professional lives, right?
Yep.
You know, we've had this vision for a long time. We're not advancing the ball. What do we need to do? Right. And so we made all of this progress over a year-long period, and everyone was dialed in and aligned. And then you see it start to fizzle a little bit, right?
Huh?
And in a remote context, I think that's what's hard, right? And we said, you know what? We're going to have an annual kickoff. So we got people together back January, and it was similar. It wasn't as like massive of a change, but we said, look, guys, we got in front. We said last year, this was our mission. It's more than notarizations. We said 2024 is going to be all about fraud. Everything we're going to do is going to be aligning about how we're, bringing even greater trust and certainty to these transactions across the platform. And we're going to focus on monetizing what we have, right? So we built all of these amazing capabilities, which we're going to package and we're going to go to market and we're going to sell, right? So I go back to what I said. I really am focused on the cadence of the business. Get aligned, go to market, learn, come back, get aligned, go to market. I think that's what's critical. And then, I've got different managers with different abilities as it relates to OKRs or KPIs, what works for engineering, what works for people over here. And so we're a little disjoint when it comes to that stuff, but it's working.
How about core values? Are any core values that you hold dear that you think are so important to have for your team?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we talk about this a lot. To me, the one that is most important to me is embrace the responsibility, right? And if you think about what we want to be as a company, we want to be a trust vendor, right? And that comes with a lot of obligations, compliance, security. If you think about, we say we want to serve the most important transactions in people's lives. Well, what people? All people, right? If we want to talk about big markets, all people, right? That means accessibility work. It means ultimately translating our service into different languages. Like, if we want to be this service, we've got to deliver. And so to me, this concept of embrace the responsibility. And the other thing, we've iterated it on a lot of times, but this concept of audacity. And it's like, we as a company want to believe we can go change the policy. We can build the product. We can solve the problem. Call us, and, you haven't figured out how to digitize it. Well, we have the relationships, we'll call the regulator. We'll go meet with them, and most companies don't operate that way. You go read the rules and you go, damn, I can't do anything about it. And that's not our culture.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm going to use that now. It's okay to have that audacity, right? To believe you can do it. And because we in that same company, a technology company, one of our bigger customers is Walmart distribution centers and retail centers, and they needed within 2 weeks. I think the number is 2,000 sites, 2,000 of their distribution center and retail center. They needed 2,000 sites to be assessed, and the pavement index, we call it the PCIs, pavement condition index, on every one of those properties within 2 weeks. 2,000 within 2 weeks. Okay, the team had never done that before. And my son, who's a CEO, said, "Guys, we're not saying no." And so he met with Walmart and said, "We're not saying no. We're going to say that don't expect perfection. Expect something special, because we're going to get it done in 2 weeks for you. But if there's things missing or things we can't do, we're going to tell you about it. But we appreciate the challenge, right?
I bet it transformed the company. I also bet it transformed the team. Like, when people do that sort of stuff. I wrote a blog post. So back in COVID, again, it was insane. Our volumes went to the moon. We had wait times, like people were waiting like 8 hours to connect with a notary. We had to solve this problem. I wrote this document internally, and I said, extraordinary companies accomplish extraordinary things. And the example I gave was Facebook. Facebook needed to translate its service. They basically translated all of Facebook, and I forget the details, but into like 40 languages in a week. And the reason is, the way they did it is they opened it up and they asked their users to translate the service. They looked at the problem. They came up with a totally different way of addressing it to other people. And what they did was extraordinary. And my point to the team was like, that was just a decision. They just did it differently, right? And so same at this time, it was like, we have to scale volume. At the time, all of the notaries were employees. It was a small team, highly curated. And we said, we got to open this up to anybody. We got to go to a market model. We got to solve all these problems. And in a matter of weeks, we completely rebuilt the platform. No different,
Awesome.
no different than your story with Walmart. But I think when you look backward, like these are the stories that make companies, right?
Well, I met with it. So I happened to be in a board meeting down in Chicago for this company. And I saw some of the team, about 6 members of the team, having lunch. And I said, "Are you guys part of this team that's doing this Walmart challenge?" And all of them were. They said, "Yeah, all of us are, and the whole company is, because we're doing something that we've never done before, and so everybody's got to be engaged in it." And I said, "So where are we at on?" They said, "We got it, man. We got it. It's going to be better than we expected, better than they expected." And they've got they have 4 days left at that point. Yesterday, had 4 days left, and they said, "We will be done, no problem, with 2,000 sites that we never thought we could do." And so again, it's pretty cool, because that you can see how they galvanized as a team, and they knew they know they're accomplishing something that's never been done before. And what's cool is when you have a customer that asks you to do something that they probably think you probably can't do, to challenge you. And now this is a story that they'll tell to the rest of their team and other potential customers, right?
I
So
totally.
it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My time at Microsoft, there's a lot of pros and cons around work culture and ethic. But I will say one of the things I really appreciated as an employee there was a rhythm to the business integrated into their release cycle, where you knew there was also a time of year where you were going to get a break. So I think if you're in a culture like this where you're charging really hard, that's really important. And so that's where every year we give the whole team a week off. We call it chillax. We do it over the week of the
Chillax. I like it.
Yeah, we did it on a whim during COVID, and now it's a thing we do every year. It's the week of the 4th. Everybody knows. So it's really cool to see what people do. And because the whole company kind of takes a break, no one's calling you, no one's bugging you. People go on trips, they see family members, they take classes, they do all sorts of cool stuff. And so, we want to be hard charging. We want to rise to the occasion, but we also want to make sure people built into their life have some sense of when they can do their own thing.
That's such a great point, because as CEOs and leaders, chairmen, board members, right, when they accomplish something like this, like, man, if we could do this every day, our revenues would be 10 times what they are today, and our profits would be this. And you're thinking all this, but actually, as you said, you can do this sometimes, right? And I think it's awesome to get people doing, and that eventually, with a team 5 times bigger, this could be a weekly, monthly production, right? But like you're saying, ask them to perform at a high level, be excited about it. But if you ask them to do it every single day, you're going to burn them out.
And also, I think the bucket of water moves around the company, like different teams at different times.
Yeah, perfect.
Have their feet to the fire, and that's fine. Like people have to step up at different times.
I love it. Hey, just briefly, hey, family, you have 4 kids in Boston. You married?
I'm married, 4 kids. Life is good.
Awesome. And raising kids in Boston's got to be a lot of fun, and a lot of history there. Beautiful city.
Yeah, I love Boston. I grew up in California, but I love it. I like the East Coast. I travel all the time, as you would imagine, but we live right in the city, and I got 4 kids that are 10, and it's a great lifestyle in Boston.
Wait, what'd you say? 4 kids that are 10? What?
Under 10 and under.
Oh, under 10. All right. I thought you had quadruplets. I say, wait a minute. You did it fast. Okay. So, and then what do you do for fun? Any recreational stuff? You look like an athlete.
I mean, I work a lot. But no, I mean, I golf, I ski, I do all, I love to ride my bike. I'm a big fan of endurance exercise when I got to make a big decision, go out there and work it out.
I like it. If you ever come to Chicago, you want to play great golf. This is the first day I've ever done my podcast in my golf club. I have a golf club here in Illinois called Bull Valley.
Oh, cool.
It's an amazing championship golf course. I think and many people think it's one of the best top 2 or 3 in the marketplace. If you like golf, it's a beautiful place to play. So when you're
in Chicago, I'm in Chicago all the time. So be careful what you wish for. So
no, I wish for it. I expect it. If I find that you don't call me and come out and play it with a friend or 2, then I think you're avoiding me. All right. Yeah, so I'd love to have you do it. So we like to end with Chris kind of taking in the things he's learned from this podcast, just to kind of reiterate kind of little nuggets of what it takes for success. Chris, could you chime in, buddy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Pat, so as someone who just relocated from Los Angeles to Barcelona, I know the joys of bureaucracy and endless notarizations. I have to ask, like, how did you develop the infinite amount of patience it would take to solve this problem?
Yeah, it's a good question. At one point I described the company as eating glass. And, I said if I ever write a book, that'll be the topic. I mean, back in the day, what I learned trying to get some of the early state laws passed is the way that they get you to go away is by moving meetings. And so they have a hearing and you show up and you'd fly to Colorado and they'd move it. And there'd be a Friday and they'd reschedule it to Monday. And you're like, oh my God, I got to fly home and I got to come back and home. And then someone's not there and you got to have it again. And it's not all intentional, but like that's just how government works. We made an early decision that we're going to win 3 ways. We're just going to show up. Doesn't matter how many times you're going to have the meeting. We're getting on the plane. We're showing up and just kind of making people realize like we're going to be here until we resolve this, right? Thing two, we're going to build it, right? We win by building it. People come up with all these hypothetical reasons why it's not going to work. You build it and you show up, you demo it, it works. Customers are using it. What can people possibly say? The real answer to your question, though, is it's our customers and our partners that sustained us. It's the classic, is the juice worth the squeeze? We had some of the largest banks, mortgage lenders, home builders, title companies calling us, showing up with us, testifying, talking about the transformational value. That's what kept us going. And that's ultimately why, I say you want to go change the rules, you got to get people to care. And we've never had that problem. Like people have always deeply cared about seeing this future and this reality, but it's infuriating. There's no way around it. It's really challenging, and it burns people out.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service, sir. That's
Yeah. Look, it's not just me. I mean, we have a whole team now, and the whole company's. We have product managers that are sitting on standards committees and testifying and participating. It's a whole company effort. So I'll pass your thanks on to the team.
Yeah. Let me know when you guys start going international.
It's happening. I mean, at this point, 45 state laws in the United States have passed bills. We do operate in all 50, so it's a national solution. The notary world is pretty small, right? So, there are countries that are starting to adopt this process. Without spending an hour on it, there is actually under the Hague Convention policies that govern notarizations internationally. That's what an apostille is. That's why you go get that.
I'm intimately familiar.
Yeah. So the whole international thing is coming and it's happening. But like, I only passed California last year. It took me 10 years. And so we're finally in a position to start to think international.
Yeah. Well, if you can get California, I don't know what country would be harder than that.
California is pretty tough. We'll save my salty comments for another day.
Yeah. So you briefly touched on something previously, and I have some strong opinions on this as well, seeing as how I don't do Google searches or Bing searches anymore. If I need to know information, I go to ChatGPT or Claude. As someone who directly worked on Bing, what are your thoughts on the future of LLMs versus search?
It's a great question. I believe in first party content. I just fundamentally do. When I worked on Bing, I believed that, and then my company that I sold to Twitter, it was about elevating voices, right? And not referential content. So I think that summarization, which I would describe a lot of these things, has a really great value, right? But ultimately, I think that, making a connection with an author or a content producer and seeing actual source information, I just don't think we ever get away from that. So I think it's a dual future. I think the need to find authoritative, clear content is never going to go away. And I think that what's critical, and again, I'm talking my book here, is that that Gary really wrote something, right? So I don't know. I'm just kind of a big believer that things are going to change a lot, but also not that much. So.
Awesome.
I mean, Google, I saw a statistic recently that 60% was it 40 or 60% of searches in Google don't leave. So you're already kind of in Google looking at their version of summarization, right? and just these LLMs and what, these take it to a much, much richer, you know, kind of end state.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, as someone with a lot of friends in the Bay Area and New York, you know, getting coverage on their startups basically makes or breaks their business. I got one friend who he got a bad review, and if he gets another one today, it's game over. You know, $2 million funded startup down the drain. I mean, obviously it's an amazing idea that you had. Were there any other strategies you employed
Yeah.
to gain so much coverage?
Yeah, I would. First off, when we launched the company, I think we did some things correctly. So I raised $2.5 million, and I spent about $250,000 on a video. So we launched with this marketing asset. I really wanted people to see the company as being different and exciting in a boring category, right? So how do we let the world know we're different? You know, be different. So that really got us out and helped, I think, have a good foundation. You know, I think when it comes to the PR and the comms game for us, if anything, I care less these days. You know, during COVID, we won every award. We got, you know, Forbes, next $1 billion startup, all sorts of fancy photos and photo shoots and stuff like that. And at a certain point, it became clear, you know, it's very rewarding, right? But that it's kind of like personal publicity more than anything, right? And some of it helps with sales, but for us, like a trade article speaking to an industry about the problem that we actually solve, I will take every day over sort of the grander things that can occur, right? And so for us, we've really rotated towards speaking to customers, finding the channels that we need to reach them in, winning business. And then the rest of it, you know, like when there's opportunities for us to really tell our story, we do that. You know, on the review front, I've been there. I mean, like the first month of the company, the editor of a major publication used the platform for their child's notarization, and it got rejected, and it put their whole trip at risk. And I get this email from this editor, and I'm like, oh my God, right? But again, like transparency, following up and saying, hey, look, we're trying to do this. It's legal. The State Department, you know, rejected it. Like, sorry, here's how we're addressing it. He responds back, I'm rooting for you. You know, there wasn't some flame article. We didn't get blasted. You know, I think people appreciate that we're, you know, some of these problems, like to your point, someone's got to go solve them. And the only way to do it is to get in the game, right? So we've always had a good amount of goodwill related to these issues. And I always just address them head on.
Awesome. I'm gonna share this with a lot of friends.
Yeah, I'd say to your friend, I mean, there's the article, then there's the go make money. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I'd love to get that video, to see that first video you guys produced, because we're at that point right now where our marketing has been terrible so far, and a company that's grown from nothing to, we think a you know, a few $100 million value today, right? And yet we do very poor marketing, and our sales team is okay. We're just selling to the same customers that I've been selling to for years, but we haven't gone outside that, and we haven't marketed worth a darn. Okay. But I've often thought a video of a cool company, if you got a great video content of a cool company, like what you're doing to solve problems or what ours does for solve problems, right? It's a no brainer if you could do it. But love to see that if I could, it's got to look it
yeah,
up.
if you just search Notarize, it's a guy in a wig. You can't miss it. And
Okay.
yeah, so it's a great story. I mean, the guy who built it, and his team who made the video, you know, I called him and he wanted to do it, and I had cold feet. He just wrote it and he sent it to me. He said, you gotta let me do this. So he nailed it. It's a great video.
And you spent all that money on getting it out there, basically.
Yeah. And you know, when we launched the company, we put the video out and we were picked up every publication that you could imagine picked up our launch because again, such a clear point. You know, we had a good perspective on it. We had a great video, a really well-designed site. So it really got picked up.
Awesome. And Chris, maybe you can attach it to this podcast too. It'd be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So what else, Chris? What'd you learn from this amazing mind?
Oh man, so much. I loved your point. If you can make it 10 years, you can start thinking in years versus quarters. That's a complete paradigm shift. Like we've had a lot of brilliant people on here say a lot of brilliant things, but I don't think we've ever had such long-term vision expressed so clearly and so valuably. Your team and the company is the product. Go slow to go fast. What really matters are change agents, and overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 10. Software compounds. Pat, where can our audience find out more about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty discoverable online. Pat Kinsel, proof.com, LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm online, so get in touch. And if you need something notarized 24/7, 365, we answer calls in less than a second. So
Awesome. And Pat, a few things I caught, Audacity. I love that, to think about that. Don't be afraid of Audacity, right? To understand we can, if you got the right team, you can do so many things that you don't even understand you can do and accomplish. So, have that mentality, have Audacity. Be okay with that, right? Makes great sense. And the chillax thing, I agree. You need to celebrate life and celebrate the team and make sure you're chillaxing once in a while, because life's too doggone short, right? And then, always show up, right? You always show up, because in this virtual world, too often, I believe that we get caught, we can just do that online. I can do that on a video call. We can do that on a Zoom call, right? I mean, that's great. It serves a purpose, right? But for what you do to solve problems and what I have to do to get through challenges sometimes, show up, be there, face to face. And you mentioned this also, things are, I forget how you said this, but basically, things have become very different than what they used to be, but actually they're kind of the same. Things don't change as much as you think when right. So that's one thing I believe. I said face to face means so much more to people than you calling in if you can go face to face, right? So I think that's great points. But really appreciate you being on today, buddy. Your story is amazing, and what an amazing business mind you are. And I can't wait to watch and see what you're going to do in the next 10 years, bud, and how we're going to use you in the future.
Appreciate it. And we'll come play some golf.
You better remember Bull Valley. I'm telling you right now, if you like championship golf courses, we are the 30th most challenging championship golf course in America. Okay. Wow. There's only one other course that competes with us in Illinois in the top 50 of that, in that list for Golf Digest. And it's just an amazing place. Bo Jackson is a buddy of mine and a member, and he plays everywhere in the world. And he says this is one of his favorites and one of the best he plays. So it means a lot when people can play anywhere in the world and they come back to this being one of their favorites. So, but get your ass up here, and I'll hold, if I'm available, you can see my lousy game. I'll play with you. If you don't want me to play with you, you can tell me.
Oh no, I'm game.
We're gonna play with better players than you. That's okay too. But I'd love to have you up. So
all right, sounds good.
Awesome. Hey, Pat Kinsel, thank you for being on Ditch Digger CEO today. We really enjoy you and what you're doing, and you are going to be a amazing mentor to many that listen to you in the future. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
God bless you. Till next time on Ditch Digger CEO. We'll see ya.